Hello and welcome to Bill Rules Classic Cars. It's Saturday morning here, so it's a bit quieter in the workshop, and it gives us an opportunity to have a look at this project, which is something we're very proud of. This is a race car which has been shipped over from the States, and it's been about a 2-year project so far, where once it arrived, it was only originally coming in for an engine, but once we started looking at it in more detail, the car was in terrible way. And so it was completely stripped down, right back to a bare chassis, and it's been sandblasted, and really a ground up restoration and race car build. And now it's at a stage where the car gets built up and disassembled many times throughout the build, but this is the final time it gets built up in bare metal, and it's a really excellent time to look at it and just have a look at the car, look at the work that's going into the hardtop and all the panels, and have a little walk around. So I've got Charlie here, my brother, Charlie Rules, who's going to come in, and we're going to talk a little bit about what he's done to this car, along with the team here at Bill Rules Classic Cars, and what the next stages are really. So here you have Charlie, who's been really managing the restoration of this project, alongside Greg, who works with you in the workshop, and the other guys throughout the process. The car's now at a stage where the chassis is completely restored, and you're building up the bodywork for the final time. So many people would think that this is basically a brand new car, but how much of the original car remained? This was a question we had with the customer, whether we put the car into a new chassis or restore the chassis. So how much of it is still the original car?
Okay, so yeah, a lot of the shrouds, the original shrouds, just had a new front section put in the front of it because previous accident damage where it had been repaired over years. It wasn't viable to keep it.
So that's a new nose on there.
So a new nose on the front there.
Yeah.
These aren't original wings, but they're the original wings for the project. It used to have side vents in it, so we've removed the side vents and altered the wheel arch gaps and the door gaps to sort of fit them a bit more correctly. So they are part of the original car. Got new doors, new boot, new bonnet, and obviously the aluminium hardtop.
So the whole body on this car is aluminium. That means nothing's steel, and actually it's come in really lightweight on the scale, isn't it? I know it's yet to be painted and a few more components to go into it, but it's looking really good, which means we can place the weight where we want to put it. A couple of other things you've done is put the racing modifications into it. So we've got oil cooler cutouts at the front, and you've also made a racing grille to go in there for cooling as well, which is really nice. So I think it'd be really good to talk about the hardtop. So if you just come around this side, Charlie, maybe you can explain to everyone looking at this how you've made this. I mean, I don't know how you'd start and where you'd finish, and to the extent of actually making all the trims as well, which are just like the original hardtop.
Yeah.
Also being a 2-seater.
Yeah, so the trickiness, obviously being a 2-seater, it's very hard to get an original hardtop for in the first place. The experience we've had with original hardtops are the fact that they don't really fit very well. Anyway, with an original 2-seater hardtop, you end up with a big sort of rubber seal, sort of bridging the gap between the rail and the bodywork to sort of take up the differences. The advantage of custom making things is you can just make it fit custom
to the car. Yeah.
So,
but you start with a flat sheet aluminium. Where do you even start?
We had an original fiberglass hardtop for it. Place it over the top, see where the discrepancies were, see where it didn't fit very well. Use the initial skin as a guide to make the aluminium skin, and then we custom fit it to the side screens and the rear shroud, get a window in place, make it all fit so it flows nicely. The advantage of making a custom roofer as well on these race cars, if you want to have the roll cage slightly higher for a bit more taller driver with clearance on your head, you can make it fit over the roll cage.
So the camera just comes around on this side. Obviously the screen on this will be replaced because this is just for fitting up. So in the end this will have a heated screen in this car, so don't worry about the smashing it. The trims here, now these are just like the original hardtop. So how did you come up with a way to make these look exactly right?
Yeah, so this is one of the most tricky parts of the job actually. I don't know if you guys on Facebook saw the other aluminium hardtop we made, which was a Mark III hardtop. In a way it's a lot simpler because it comes round, just butts up against the windscreen, and it's just a constant flow of metal. Same with the sides, they just sort of roll around and your windscreen seal just fits on the side. So there's no complex sort of edging. To make this look original, we've basically selected custom bead rolls to roll the extrusion in some flat sheet, and then we've used the shrinker stretcher to form it around the correct shapes for the window edges and the windscreen edge, and obviously the rear shroud edging, to make it look original. So although it's a custom fit, we want it to look as original as possible. So that's what we did really.
And then when you come to weld the trims, is it really difficult with TIG welding such a delicate piece? I mean, what's the greatest challenge when you're fabricating something like this?
So obviously with these trim sections, on the original one, where they would have been aluminium anyway, and the skin would have been fiberglass, they were all bonded on. So they're a bit tricky to get off sometimes on the original ones. You have to sort of warm them up and wiggle them off, and they do come off eventually. Something like this, again, it's just all custom made, so you've got to sort of try and work your way through the job as you're going, trying to think, well, how am I going to stick that on, how am I going to weld that together?
And even if you go and make another one in the future, you may do it a different way, not
I
doing it wrong, but just every project is slightly different, isn't it? The metal works in a different way.
You're always learning as you're going along. So with this, we thought we'd try and sort of puddle weld them on, which is a case of sort of drilling holes, clamping it together, welding the hole and catching the base material at the same time. It ended up being rather difficult. With a slightly wider section, you'd have a bigger hole and you could sink through to the base material a lot easier. I did a few and found it was sort of trying to burn the edge away quite quickly, and it ended up looking like it was going to be a complete disaster, so we stopped in our tracks. We ended up sort of tagging it along on the inside all the way along. Again, you can't see it from the external finish. If you flipped it over the other way, you'd see the welds on the inside. But once the seal goes in around there and it's stuck up in there, they're probably actually a stronger weld anyway, so it stopped it all being distorted. Because that's the problem, you spend all this time making something all nice and straight, and then you go and sort of hit it with a welder, and if you're not careful, it might sort of bend it and buckle it in the wrong direction. So part of me was thinking about sort of bonding them on, but then I thought, the door opening and closing all the time, if it hasn't caught it properly, if the side seam catches the edge, it sort of pulls the trim off, it's going to look pretty messy. So.
And I mean, it really is a case of something like this, where 90% of it takes 50% of the time, and then that final 10% again takes 50% of the time. So you got to the form quite quickly.
Yeah, we made the skin within a few days, really. But then it's all the custom fitting, getting all the side screens on the car, getting it all trimmed around nicely.
If you also look at on your side around where the doors, the side screens.
Yeah, so around here, this is all obviously matched to the side screen profile, and then flowed out into the extrusion.
So when the side screen is on the door, it really just beautifully misses that. We'll end up having a weather seal in there as well, so this will all be fitted on when it's clamped down. So at the moment we can actually lift this off, which is probably quite a good thing to do.
Lift it off.
So another advantage is it being really lightweight. So now looking inside the car, you can see that all the chassis, all the substructure's all been painted. And as being a race car, we've also put in special things that it needs, like blanking off panels where the battery inspection tray would be, but making sure the pressings look like the original floor pans.
Yeah, so I'll give a bit of a shout out to Greg on this one, who works with me. He was in charge of a lot of the chassis work, and he's done a lot of the body work as well. Obviously on a race car, we need a barrier between the fuel cell and the cockpit area. So the easiest way to do that is to actually fabricate panels and weld them into all the positions where the open holes would be. Obviously this one goes down into the axle normally, but it still needs to be covered. So instead of just sort of, a lot of people might just fold a bit of aluminium around it and sort of rivet it on, which is fine, does the job. But we've gone to the next level here really. We've actually pressed in some nice pieces into this here, making it look like the original floor pans, so keeping it in keeping with the vehicle. And this has all been sort of welded into place. Again with the rear section where the original spare wheel would come through. We've made a piece in there which looks very in keeping as well. But just that sort of next sort of level of finish really.
Yeah. And thinking ahead of when the car's in bare metal, for when we come to build it like it is in paint now, things like the fire extinguisher, all the seats, the spare seat if we're going to fit one, that's all got bracing already in place, mostly with captive nuts with a lot of these things, so that when it comes to fitting up in bare metal, it's just a case of bolting it together. And I think that's really helped with this project, having the experience that we've got to think ahead when we come to build.
Yeah, things like the battery box, it's all custom made in-house. You can buy aluminium versions online. We make them out of steel because they're a lot more sturdy.
You've got to think, you've got to think of an accident.
Yeah, when you're in an accident, the last thing you want to do is be sort of rolling around all over the place and then suddenly the battery's flying around in the cockpit area. So the weight saving on an aluminium structure probably isn't worth it. I mean, very unlikely it's going to come out, but it's safety first.
Always safety first.
And we've fitted captive plates behind that, so if we need to get the battery out in the paddock, we can pull that out of the way without all the nuts and stuff falling off the back. Makes the job a lot easier. The last thing you want to do when you're in a racetrack is start scrabbling around underneath in a panic. So what we can do to make life easier, we do really.
And so the next case is really laying out the dashboard in the layout we want for that as well.
Yeah, so Will's started to label the bits in place there. There's obviously, the world is your oyster, you can put your switches wherever you want. We try and make it as natural for the driver as possible, putting stuff like windscreen wipers, light switches, all within arm's reach, so you don't have to think about it when you're going hell for leather. Anything that's sort of auxiliary can go on like a switch panel, can be switched on before the race starts, and then you don't have to think about it. Let's have a look under here.
So now we have a look in the engine bay. See how the guys have been getting on in there. So from the mechanical side of the workshop, they did a really good job. All the components here are built in-house, so engine, gearbox, front suspension, rear axle, it's all completed by the team here at Bill Rules Classic Cars. As you can see now, the engine's installed. It's a case of getting the inlet on it, the Webbers, and we're trying to get it started up before Christmas. That's our goal. So Charlie, in the engine bay, without giving away all the trade secrets, there's a few upgrades you've done throughout the car to the chassis, but most of them you can see from in here, can't you?
Yeah, so we stiffen all the wishbone mounting points, strength and stiffness. Also, again, even with the road Healeys, is something to be aware of, is the engine mounts do actually eventually crack off the chassis. So with obviously a high performance engine with the stiffened engine mountings on it, we triangulate the engine mounts on the chassis, beef up the welds a little bit to make them sort of stronger. It's always a good thing to do. The amount of cars we see nowadays with the cracks going around the engine mounts.
Yeah, and this is the original chassis, but we put a new front chassis section into this.
Yeah,
it had a bad crash.
So when it came to us, it must have had a crash. Someone had done a feasible repair to keep it going in its life, but it was sort of at a point where we were at a stage where it needed to be done properly. So we bought a chassis section, grafted it into the original chassis, and it looks as good as new now.
And we do a lot of front chassis sections. It's a really common thing to bend on a Healey, and we probably do between 8 and 12 a year, I'd say.
Some of the lightest bumps on the corner can end up kinking it just past the engine mount. Sometimes it goes between the wishbone and the engine mount.
There's a lot hanging on the front end here.
It's one of those things, some accidents you walk away and it isn't damaged at all. It just hits it in the wrong place and it finds that weak spot and it twists it in.
That's right.
So it's a lot easier from our point of view. With
and
a better end result.
We know we put data in, we know what we're working with then.
All the front chassis comes pre-aligned, so you don't have to then sort of, if you're just working on one corner, you're trying to realign it with the other corner. 4 or 5 cuts, you have the front out of it, graft the new bit back in.
And then and then we've got a jig as well, which we put the front chassis in with. It's worth noting as well that we've got sliding top mounts on this, so for setting up the suspension, as well as the safety steering column. On a standard car, this column goes straight through from the steering box straight through to the driver. An essential part of having a race car is preparing for the unexpected, and so we have a safety column with 2 universal joints here, which should either go sideways or break in the case of an accident. So this is looking really, really good in here, and the body finish of the car is going to be in the same colour. When it all comes together, it's going to look excellent. So this is looking really good now. We're almost at a stage, although the car's completely built up, and we do this just to check in bare metal, it's going to come completely apart again, ready for the paint. prep stage and over to Dan and the guys in the body shop for that really. So that's the next stage, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, it's looking great. Our plan is really to get it painted towards the end of January, and then finishing up in February, March for some testing in the new year, and then it'll be racing on a circuit near you. It may end up going back to the States, it may stay in this country for a while, but I think it's a testament to the guys at Bill Rules Classic Cars for the work that's been done so far. It's looking really, really good, and I can't wait to hear it running, and more so, I can't wait to see it on track.
Yeah,
so,
it should be good.
Well, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this update. We may bring you another one when it's painted, and hopefully when it's finished on the rolling road. Thanks for all the following of our page. We do really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Ciao.